Hey y'all, Rachel Joy Baribeau here. I gotta tell you a lot of things about this episode, about the next week, and just how much I love you. So, by the way, I am the founder of I'm Changing the Narrative, author of best-selling book Relentless Joy. Y'all, this makes a great gift. You can get it on Amazon or wherever books are sold. People are sending me pictures from around the country where they're finding it in big box stores, which when I was first putting this out, that I was told that wasn't probably going to happen, that you could order it online, but that more than likely you wouldn't find it in airports and you wouldn't find it in big box stores, maybe on my first book. Oh, by the way, give God a challenge and watch him go. I get pictures all the time from Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, airports all over the country, Chicago, Arizona, Minnesota. Yeah. So great gift. You can also go to Amazon, y'all, and put in Joy Journal, Rachel Baribeau, or hit the link below in the show notes. And there is a Joy Journal that makes a great compilation to this. And if you send this to me, I will even sign this for somebody. So just FYI. As I mentioned, have so much to share with you. And first of all, it's about this episode. And this episode is a recording from the Joy Starters Club. Joy Starters Club is totally free, y'all. It used to be paid. It's completely free Facebook group. In 2025, there are more levels of accountability, wink, wink, and accessibility that will be coming. But right now and forever, the Joy Starters Club Facebook group is always going to be free. Okay, so you can go there, you can join. Every third Tuesday of the month at 6:30 Eastern, we have a free and open call. Sometimes I bring on really famous people and coaches and different people, and sometimes I coach. This month I coached. And so if you hear like pauses or breaks in action, we did that to protect people's privacy. Okay, so that's what you're hearing and what you're going to see. This month, always, I mean, every month blows my mind, but this month blew my mind because we were talking about shame. We were talking about boundaries. We were talking about how to handle grief and the holidays, and some people being with a ton of people and some people being alone, and how to deal with that. And the messages I got in response, like I needed that. I used the mental health battle plan, mentalhealthbattleplan.com. It literally saved my life. Somebody said that to me, and thank you for the call. You went so deep. I wasn't expecting it. I don't want you. Here's the takeaway from this call. You know, I'm big about takeaways in this podcast episode. I don't want you to take shame into 2025. So if there's something you have shame about, I want you to sit with it, investigate it, think about it. I don't want you taking it into 2025. You hear me? Okay. So get a notebook, get ready for this. Lastly, I just want to say, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I won't see you until the new year in terms of a podcast, and you do it for me. You are why I do what I do. I adore you. I am appreciative. I'm so grateful. The fact that you listen to me, that you give me your time, that you care what I have to say, like continually blows my mind. I live in a state of awe. So thank you. I also want to remind you of this, that Christmas is in your soul. Christmas is in your spirit. I was having a conversation with my CrossFit coach this morning about that, about lights and a tree and all of those things. And I thought about that this morning. I've thought about it, excuse me, for a while now, because at night, my house with the Christmas trees, I have a few, one, two, three, four. I have four in different rooms, and two of them are real and two of them are fake. And the lights at night, they just take me back to being a little kid. They take me back to Christmas with my family. My mom, I feel like a kid. And I'm like, Christmas is in my soul. Christmas spirit, joy, it's in my soul. It's not about gifts, it's about giving, it's about love. And you know, I'm inclusive and I love everybody and I include everybody no matter what you believe. But for me, Jesus is the reason for the season, right? So I just want to remind you that no matter if you're with a ton of people and navigating boundaries and happy and all of those things, or if you're alone and there's no presents, that you have Christmas right in here. Okay. You got Christmas right in here. And I am so grateful that to tell you this. I'm so grateful to share this with you and remind you that Christmas spirit lives right here. And lastly, I want to tell you, by the time this podcast comes out, it will have already happened. But just be thinking about 225 men in Florida that I am going to be speaking with on Sunday, that I get to be one of the last outside message they get before Christmas. And so if you could just pray prayers of some positive thoughts of reconciliation, of peace, of healing, of joy and of love, and of restored relationships, I would so appreciate it. I love you guys. I'm so very grateful for you. Have the best, most beautiful Christmas in my spirit, Christmas, and I'll see you in 2025. I'm going to keep their details vague on purpose, but I have talked with several people this month that on the outside, everything appears to be just fine. Everything appears to where we're rocking and rolling, we're good. But when I start to have had deeper conversations with them, they are carrying around a albatross of shame, financial shame. They're not where they want to be. They're embarrassed of it. Shame about maybe the way their health, shame about that they're not in a relationship or that the relationship is not good. A number of people that I have met, I literally, it has hit me like a ton of bricks, and God really just placed on my heart to speak on this tonight. And I am not asking you to share. You know, you can always share. You know that you can share in the chat. You can just raise your hand. You can speak. You can do any of those things. But I want you to do some investigative work over the next ever how many days there are, right? 8 days till Christmas, and ever how many days there are at the end of the month till the 1st of January. And I want you to investigate that shame if you are carrying it. And I want you to investigate it so much so that you do not carry it into 2025. And I will tell you, I will start and be very vulnerable. And so I'm just going to take the mask off and be real, y'all, and tell you that I had shame because I lost everything at the end of 2020. I had one revenue stream, and that was speaking. And when COVID hit, it shut down any opportunity for speaking for the first 3/4 of that year, most of that year. And therefore, my entire speaking year that was already planned got shut down. And no one knew when their budgets were going to come back. No one knew when we were going to be able to assemble in large crowds. And so I lost every bit of my income, and I ended up losing my house. And fast forward, and even before that, here's the digger. And I'm sharing this not to make you sad, but I want us to all unburden ourselves before the end of the year as much as we can. I don't want y'all to carry unnecessary shame into 2025, especially if we can investigate it and figure out what the root of it is and just drop it off. If back up just a bit, in 2019, when I felt like this might happen, my mom had just passed away. I had taken care of her. I had negative money in my bank account because I'd been helping her. I had not been working as much. I've been living down in Alabama. And I never regret that. Guess what? Never in my life. I'd go through bankruptcy 20 times over if it meant taking care of my mama the way I took care of her, and sending her on trips and walking her out the way I walked her out. But I share all this to say is that, y'all, I had a lot of shame around my story. And even so much so that when I wrote Relentless Joy, I almost did not include that part, that I lost everything, because I was ashamed that people, and I was scared that people would think differently of me, think that I was a loser or a failure or any of those things. And then the Lord whispered to me, Rachel, these were circumstances that were beyond your control. The whole world shut down, first of all. You know, you have no control over that. It affected everybody. And secondarily, would you have changed anything that you did for your mama? Absolutely not. Not a bit. Not in any stratosphere, right? And so I wrote about it. I speak about it now from stages that I lost everything and crawled back by the grace of God. Right. And when they allowed us in 2021, the world allowed us speaking in groups again. I remember the first engagement that I had, it was at Texas Tech, and they flew me out and then did a COVID test right before I went in to speak to the team. And I was just waiting. We were all so nervous about COVID at the time. I was in that room waiting, praying, Lord, please let me not have gotten COVID on the plane. And the COVID test came back positive, or excuse me, negative, and I was able to speak. And because of what I did, the groundwork that I did while I was shut down was largely responsible for what I do today, because I decided not to quit. So I want y'all to write this down: is what am I? And you may not be carrying any. And if you're not, God bless you. That is awesome. I am so happy. Teach us, teach people, keep teaching. If you're not carrying any shame into 2025, then I am so happy for you. But if you are, right? If you are, I was just recently talking to somebody and she said, I'm so ashamed, but my mother is helping me with this payment. And I said, honey, I said, first of all, what an honor and a gift that you still have your mom. I said, second of all, what an honor and a gift it is that your mom can help you financially. And what a good mama you have. I hope that you go to your mama and you hug her and tell her thank you. And that 2025 is your year to bounce back and your year to come back, and that you will honor her by all the things that you do to touch and affect other lives. And so it just got me to thinking that so many people are likely feeling the same way. And then I began, like I said, began to have this conversation with different people about, well, I'm ashamed of this and I'm ashamed of that. And I felt like in my spirit that I needed to talk to you guys about that tonight. So and here's some important little points about shame. There's parts of my story as well, even before my mom passed away and all of those things happened in 2020. I have parts of my story that aren't pretty that I'm very grateful for to this day. And those parts include things like addiction. And I had an agent in New York that early on, about 10 years ago, said to me, 10, 15 years ago, said to me, I was telling my story in a halfway house in Birmingham that's in the book, the Love Lady Center. And he told me, under no circumstances do you talk about that part of your story outside of that halfway house, because there could be people that read it and they don't hire you because of it. What I didn't get at that point was that this man had inadvertently attached his shame to my story. And I was so naive, so not healed. And look, here's the other thing I want to tell you about that. If there are things that you wished you did differently in 2024, I don't want you to bash her or bash him. I want you to hold them tenderly and say you were doing the best you could. Okay? Write that down. I'm not mad at you. This is to your 2024 self as we walk into 2025. I'm not mad at you. You were doing the best you could. With the skills and the knowledge and everything that you had, you were doing the best that you could. Okay. So I want you to say that to yourself. So I'm not mad at the younger Rachel that said to this agent, okay, I won't talk about it. I won't talk about that part of my story. Okay, I understand that. But I remember saying to him, you really think that 10 years later that somebody wouldn't hire me because of that, 7, 8 years later? And he said, yeah, there could be people that don't hire you because of that. Wow. Okay. Dana. Wow.
Then you don't want that job.
Yes, exactly. Oh, and this was the same agent. This is hilarious. This is the same agent that told me, he said I would post about God, and there was scripture on my website, and he said, you really need to tone down the dogma. He said, and those are his words. And he said, isn't it funny the certain conversations we remember like it was yesterday? And he said, you need to tone down the dogma. And he said, because this is going to keep you from getting hired. And I said, you know what? I said, I don't want any job that doesn't want me for talking about God. If that, if God doesn't bless it and have his hand on it, then I don't want that job anyway. Right. So as you're unpacking anything that may be any feeling of inadequacy, feeling of look, here's another thing. I heard another author say this. Shame is like mold. It grows in the dark.
Mm.
And how do we eradicate mold? We eradicate mold, y'all, by, and let me just change something here. We eradicate mold, y'all, by putting light onto it, by putting joy onto it, by putting truth onto it. You can call all those things light. Like mold doesn't grow out in the open, it grows in these damp, dark places. So, what am I saying that for? I am saying whether it's me or your therapist or a friend or a family member or whoever it is, that I want you to get free of this shame in 2024 and not carry it into 2025. Okay. So I saved this week to talk about these things. And one of the things that I saw was, you ready for this? It says self-care tip, but y'all know around these parts, we call it soul care, right? It's deeper than self-care. So I'm just going to put words in their mouth. Soul care tip. Unfollow every account that makes you feel like you have to be somebody else. If you're following an account and it makes you feel less than, it makes you feel bad about yourself, it makes you compare, it makes you feel some sort of way. If any of those, if this account makes you feel terrible about yourself, then unfollow it. Unfollow it. I've learned over the years that there are, just a funny side note. So I follow people that I speak to, particularly athletes. And one day I hit the 7,500 mark of following after years of doing this. And I got a message from Instagram that said, "You've hit your follower limit." And I'm like, "What? My follower limit?" Y'all, apparently Instagram has a follow limit. So I cannot follow more than 7,500 people. So every time I want to follow somebody, I have to unfollow, follow. And I find it to be strange because I like to follow, like I said, the athletes that I speak to. So that's one thing just to make you giggle. But secondarily, I have gone through my social media before and I've done this. How does that make me feel? Why was I following them in the first place, right? I read a study this week that talked about every single time you argue with your business partner, with your spouse, with whoever it may, anytime you argue, that for 3 to 4 hours, your system becomes dysregulated and inflamed.
Oh, yeah.
Every time you argue with somebody, but every time you argue with somebody, 3 to 4 hours you're inflamed, and 3 to 4 hours your system is dysregulated. And inflammation is the it goes right alongside with disease. And if you break down disease, it's dis-ease. Dis-ease. Your system is at dis-ease. And that made me think about just shame. It made me think about self-preservation and self-protection. I remember hearing about this from a therapist friend years ago that said, I didn't know this at that time. This was 7 years ago, 6 years ago. And she said, yes, they're linking chronic illness to trauma. People that have held on to trauma for a really long time, they're linking it to chronic illness. So write this down, y'all, as we go into 2025. Don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to pivot. And many of us are, sometimes myself included, afraid to pivot because we don't want to look stupid. We don't want to look like we don't know what we're doing. People ask me this all the time, and I'm just teaching here, free association, so just go with me, okay? People ask me this all the time. Well, because I do whiteboarding with coaching clients. We've done it in Joy Starters before, and we'll do it again in 2025. People say, well, where's the margin for God? And I said, look, here's what we're going to do. In whiteboarding, we make a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year plan. What is that going to look like? What do we want that to look like? But guess what? We also leave room for it to go in a whole totally different direction if God wants to take us in a different direction, right? Like we're making plans with the best skills and knowledge that we have, and loving ourselves and doing the work and getting our shovel. But if God wants to take us somewhere else, he's going to take us somewhere else. And just knowing that that he's in the margins. He is the margin. He is the air. He's the whole whiteboard, you know? One of the unnecessary things we carry, y'all, is shame. And I just refuse in 2025 to be ashamed of things in my life. And if there is shame, I believe shame is a tool of the enemy. I believe he would love to keep it in the dark, and he doesn't want you to tell people that, or ask for help, that maybe you're struggling in your marriage, or that you need some help because you've got a shopping addiction, or you really like to gamble too much and it's not healthy. I don't know what your thing is, but I can tell you, as somebody who went through addiction with drugs, that there are many kinds of addiction. And part of why people do not get set free is they're ashamed to talk about what is going on in their life. And so what I would ask you to do in reflection is to ask yourself, what am I carrying, right? What am I carrying that I'm not meant to carry into 2025? I would not wish what I walked through. I'm not, let me rephrase this. I'm not glad that what I walked through in my addiction, I'm not proud of it. I'm not glad. I'm not happy that it hurt the people that it did. But there is a part of me that is so grateful. I've been going to this halfway house and speaking for 12 years, that look at me and they look at me like this. What does she know about me? You know? And then I'll begin to tell them my story and they're like, oh my gosh, you get it, right? And so I am, in the weirdest way, grateful for what I went through so that I can relate to other people that are walking through it. I don't remember when this happened, but I was telling my therapist about this, and this is super vulnerable. And oftentimes, shame will make us go back to parts of our story and we will relive it. You know, we will feel such guilt, such shame for the things that we did. And I remember thinking about a part of my story that was not who I am today, right? And that happened within those years of addiction. And I remember it was, like I said, a few years ago, it was bringing up such deep feelings of regret and shame. And no one told me to do this. It happened naturally, and I thank God for it. You know, if I'm looking at it from a psychological standpoint, it probably would have been inner child work. And you know, you guys know I'm a huge fan of inner child work, and that is when you go back. If you're not familiar, Google it. You can find tons of videos. We have, if you want, we have resources at I'm Changing the Narrative, where we've had a therapist come in at one of our retreats and do a meditation. But it's where you go back and sit with your younger self and any past version of yourself, particularly your child, you as a child, and you soothe them. You walk with them, you talk with them, you tell them that they're okay and that they're loved, and you give them what they needed. And so I was familiar with this kind of work, but a few years ago when this happened, I was revisiting a version of myself that when I was in my 20s. And without knowing it, in this meditation or this prayer, this quiet time, I saw myself going into the living room where I lived at the time and sitting with that version of Rachel and putting my hand on her hand and telling her, it's okay. It's okay. You were broken. It's okay. And I soothed her. I looked at her. I saw how much in deep pain she was in. And I can't say how long it lasted. I can't say any of these things. But what I can tell you is I have not experienced that deep regret that I experienced for a long time, because it's like I released that
Yes.
former version of myself. And I said to her, I forgive you, and you weren't the woman that you are today, because the woman that you are today would not have gotten herself in those situations and made those decisions and all the things that happened. And so it was really powerful. I invite you guys to take a moment in this busy, beautiful holiday season that has a lot of feelings for a lot of people. And I invite you to get quiet and sit down with, if you can in your mind, that former version of yourself, whether it's in 2024 or whether it is somewhere, Josh, way back in your past. And I want you to envision current Josh sitting with Josh from way back, right? And saying, Josh, you were doing the best you could. I love you. I forgive you. I'm not who I am today because we all have moments in our lives where we've done things where we're not proud of. Every single one of us has that. And if you don't, oh Lord, come teach me some tricks because we all have got those points where we just didn't handle ourselves right. I've shared with many of you multiple times, just moments where we're not proud of ourselves in the moment, the way we talk to somebody, the way we handle a situation, the way we fly off the handle. We're continually being refined. I never say to people, I'm healed. I say I'm in a state of healing. I'm not healed from that. I'm healing from that. As long as you're seeking, learning, growing, pushing, then in my opinion, you're in a state of healing. I don't like to tell people that I'm completely healed from something because that denotes that I have it figured out. If I'm not careful and I don't talk to little Rachel and I don't go to therapy and I don't work through things and I don't, sit alone and seek healing and all of these things, then how little Rachel felt will affect my decisions today. Right. And so I heard somebody one time, a dear friend of mine, she said, a therapist told her, if you have a significant other or family member, whoever it is, and you're arguing, remember we talked about when we argue, we have 3 to 4 hours of inflammation and dysregulation. But when you're arguing with somebody, particularly your mate, if you can just imagine it's little husband and little wife, like that, you're arguing with their little self, like it's funny. I mean, it really is. Like, if I can imagine my husband, his 8-year-old self arguing me because that's what's coming out, right? Like that either need to feel seen, to be heard, to be validated, to any of those things, right? That's what's coming out. I talk to little Rachel. I say, you're doing such a good job. You grew up and doing big things. And guess what? You're valued and you're loved and you're seen and you're heard and here's another one for me. You're wanted because I talked about it in the book and no one ever called me this in my life. But I know now who called me this, and it was the enemy. But when I found out, my parents told me I was adopted by my father, and when I was younger, but I didn't really care. I wanted to go watch the Smurfs. I was like, I don't care. Okay, good, whatever. So my dad adopted me. Who cares? But when I re-found out when I was 11 or 12, I began to hear in my spirit the word bastard and unlovable and unwanted. And I never told anybody about it. And I wondered, I was trying to figure out in therapy later on in my life how that played out into my addiction. And it was because my half my childhood or in my adolescence, I was calling myself those things. I was telling myself that I was unwanted and unloved and I was a bastard. And I never told anybody that, but I was imprinting it on my soul all the time. And it is so important, y'all. So important, my loves, that we think about the vessel, let me use this glass cup. By the way, I can't have caffeine after 5. Is anybody else? I can't have it after 5 or I'll be up. But if this glass was broken, okay, because of shame, because of negative self-talk, because if this glass is broken, right, then any good thing that comes to us in 2025 or before that, we're not going to be able to contain it because the container is broken. Do y'all feel me here? What I'm teaching? So I really want y'all to examine the container. Examine the container of your soul. I'm asking y'all to do some deep work. You don't have to do this between the 17th and the 31st, but this can be work that we continue into the season, into the first of the year, after the first of the year. I'm going to give you one more thought and then I'm going to open it back up. And it's this. We went through at our at our I'm Changing the Narrative meeting this week, we started talking about grief and some of the things about the holidays. And one of the things that came up, because we have a woman who serves with us whose son took her life. And she is obviously still grieving very, very hard from that. And we were talking about grief and we were talking about dealing with the holidays. And I want to just have you write down a phrase for me, a word, and it's ask. I want you to teach your family to ask. Yes, I want to talk about my dad. Yes, I want to tell stories. Yes, I want to talk about my mom. Yes, I want to talk about my parents. This has also been hitting, so I wanted to teach on this. Is people are afraid they're going to upset you, so they don't talk about your loved ones. They don't talk about the things you've lost. They don't talk because they're afraid. And guess what? So then everybody's tiptoeing, dancing, and Felicia really wants to talk about the memories of her dad at Christmas. And I really want to talk about the memories of my mom at Christmas, but then nobody's I now at holidays, I talk about my mom. I'm the one that stands up and says, "My mom would have really loved this. My mom would have made that." Mama, and what I'm trying to do is let you know that it's okay to talk about her. And I might cry. That's part of the human experience. But I want to teach people this into this year and into next year to just simply ask whatever Christmas looks like for you. It may not be any presents underneath the tree. You may have a Friendsgiving. You may not have family. You may, whatever it looks like, you may have a big family. You may not be able to travel wherever you find yourself on the spectrum. If you're able to tell your friends or your family and say, hey, and maybe you just started off and you say, hey, you know what? I know that the holidays are a really hard time for a lot of people. May I ask you if there's anything that maybe I'm staying away from in fear of upsetting you that you'd like to talk about? Is there anything that you don't want to talk about? Y'all, we miss the mark in connection and collaboration and all of the things, I think, by the things left unsaid. Y'all know I teach on this idea of over communication versus under communication. And yet, if we don't ask, we don't know. So if we under communicate, we just assume that Felicia don't want to talk about her daddy and Rachel didn't want to talk about her mom. And so I want to encourage you and challenge each one of you. If whoever you are missing this holiday season, if it's a person, I want to encourage you on this, is to whoever Felicia is still alive that had interactions with your father, I want you to go to them and ask them a simple question. And I want you to put the recorder on your phone or get yourself
Yes.
a notebook and take notes. And I want you to say, tell me a story about my daddy. When they go, not if, we're all going to go, y'all. We're all walking each other home. I recognize that those stories will pass with them if I don't write them down, if I don't ask them. And so it has been like, I'm like on this journey of tell me a story about Georgia, which is my mom's name. Tell me a story about my mom. And I'm just listening. I'm taking notes. I'm learning all these funny stories about her, about how the time she got a perm when she was younger and they left it in too long. And it was really bad. So just funny stories, y'all. And here's one last thing I'll say, and then I want to open it up to y'all, is that we determine how we're going to walk somebody out. We determine how we're going to walk somebody out. And for some of us, we get the diagnosis and we have some time and it's still too short. Some of us, it's sudden. And I want you to think about that as you go into 2025, not in a morbid way. I want you to think about the guy at work that you really like or your mentor in the sportscasting business, right? Write down his stories. I think about Cecil Hurt, famous Alabama reporter. I know some of his stories. I remember some of them, but I don't remember. I wish I would have write them down, talk about them, And so as I'm thinking about my uncle, I'm thinking a lot of, and the crazy thing is, y'all, it's not crazy, but he is so at peace. He's like, I know where I'm going. I know I've lived a good life. He was like, and he's just like very, and that's what faith will give us. But I have just recognized with him and what's going on with him. is that I may not have been, I was living my life doing that. We weren't ever not close, but, we didn't talk much. And now I'm treasuring these weekly chats where we just chat about the Shroud of Turin or the fact that he told me that in his genealogy, because I've done my mom's side, he's done his dad's side, is that we think we are descendants, great, like 10 times over from, oh my gosh, what was her name? I'm gonna look it up. But my point is that I'm getting to hear these stories and I'm getting to share stories with him. I got to share a story with him, and I really will shut up. Is I said, you know what, Monk? I said, Uncle Jimmy, I remember when we were little, because I was raised with my first cousins, his daughters. When we were little, you used to pick us up out of the back of the station wagon and carry us inside the bed. And I said, there were a few times where I wasn't really asleep, but I just faked being asleep. So you would pick me up and put me in bed. I felt so safe with you. And the next time we talked, he said, I really appreciate you telling me that, Rachel. He said, because what I remembered from that time, check this out, was I was on the road a lot. I was away. I loved my family, but I was away a lot. So I got to give him a different version of himself, that he was a great dad and a great uncle, and that who doesn't want somebody to pick him up out of the station wagon and carry him inside, right? Who doesn't want that? And so he was like, wow, thank you so much. He was like, you helped me to realize that. Y'all, we have that power with intentionality, with collaboration, with connection, and a snotty nose. We have that power to walk people out. You can call it walking them home, walk people out, but you have that power in your soul to do that. And I just refuse to go into 2025 not just really focused on whether it's an everyday mundane, interaction with somebody, or whether it's something bigger. And I want to walk people home, and I want to walk people out, helping them remember who they were and remember that they are good, because forgiveness is the key, y'all. It's the key. It's everything. My stepdad and I had a very tough childhood when he married my mom. Y'all, he walked me down the aisle at my wedding. Mind blowing. And none of that would have happened without forgiveness. And I remember my brother said to me years and years ago, when I still was harboring a lot of resentment and bitterness for him, he said to me, you need to call him and ask him for forgiveness. And I said, ask him for forgiveness. I resisted it. I was like, ask him for forgiveness. Was the adult. He did this, he did that. And I fought it, and I fought it, and I fought it. And I still remember where I was when I made the phone call. And I said, hey, can we talk? And he said, yeah. And I said, listen, I just want to say I'm sorry for anything that I may have done in my childhood. And it got quiet on the other end of the line. And he said, no, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I hurt you. And come to find out, he had been through things in his childhood with his father. And y'all, we're the best of friends now. He is one of my best friends on the planet. It's the greatest gift you can give somebody as you're walking them out, as you're walking them home, is forgiveness. And who are we to be the arbiter of whether they deserve it or not? So if you've seen good love, show good love. If you haven't, break the pattern and woo, do something better. Yeah, Lord of mercy. May you have a blessed and beautiful holiday. And if you need somebody, if you're feeling lonely, reach out. We're all here. That's why we have this group. That's why we have this community. Don't suffer in silence. There are too many people this season that do that, and don't do that. Okay? Love you guys.